Hey guys, it's Chala from BS I Love You. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be using these Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers and creating some fun backgrounds using this acetate. And I have my watercolor paper, Canson watercolor, a spray bottle, and just a round brush. What I want to do is create some color splash images, just some simple colorful backgrounds, and I'm going to start off with a standard A2 size card panel. On the horizontal position. I'm using my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station just to hold this down. I didn't want to have to tape it down to a board. I've picked out some of my Zig colors here that I want to use, a nice color combination. If you're looking for color combinations, just go ahead and head to the internet and search out good color combinations or color palettes, and you can find them online there, just to give you an idea of what colors are complementary and go well together. I simply just start out by taking the Zig marker and scribbling it onto this acetate piece. I like the look of the color smushing, and I can never really, this color splashes and I can't really ever get it a nice look, so this is a real simple way to do that. I just covered my surface there with a cloth as I spray the acetate with a water bottle. And then I'm going to go ahead, turn it over, and literally just smush it onto the watercolor paper. Now, if you are a great watercolorist and you can do this just by using the brush, kudos to you. I haven't made it that far. I find it hard to just relax, so this is a simple way for me. And I'm just using my finger there just to press down and move the ink around. Now, I didn't have as much water on there as I should, so I had to respray the acetate and lay it back down and give it another rub there, and that helps blend the colors together. And then you'll notice when I go to pull it off, the water kind of pools in one area. That's okay. If it bothers you, you might want to just let the acetate sit on there and let it dry on its own. I'm impatient, so I pulled it off and I have a little bit of that color pooling. You can just blot that up with some paper towel. And then I'll actually move some of that ink around just to blend it into the project itself. I kind of like the purple color it created and wanted to work that into the background. So I set that aside to dry for a bit, and then of course became impatient and used my heat tool. And you can go ahead and do that. You just have to be careful, it will warp your paper, so I turned it over just to even out that warp. And then what you can do is just run it through your die cut machine without any die cuts to flatten it out. There you go, there's our first background. The next one I'm using some blues and greens, and this time instead of doing necessarily a scribble, I am going to try something a little different. Now, I didn't clean the acetate off well enough, so you still see a little bit of pink. That's okay, not a big deal. Hopefully you can see the colors there: cobalt, blue, light blue, and blue. Again, you can go to the internet to get some color palettes. This one I'm doing little circles to see what different looks I can get. The third color I have there is actually really, really light. I kind of scribble it in between. I'm not really sure if it shows up or makes much of a difference in the end, but yeah, we'll just go with it. Again, I use my, had a piece of cat hair there. I'm going to go ahead and use my spray bottle, and I'll spritz it with some water. Now what you can do is spray your watercolor paper first as well, just to do the wet on wet. This one was doing a wet on dry technique. So this one's a little more controlled. I'm not sure I like it as much as the scribbling. I think the dots are just they don't spread out the color doesn't kind of spread out as much as I had hoped, so I kind of play around with this one a little bit more than I did with the first one. And you can see when you go to lift the acetate, it really pulls the pigments of that watercolor with it. So again, if you want, you can just leave it, set it aside, and let it dry like this. It will take a lot longer though. But it's kind of neat though when you do go to lift it up, how it does move that ink around. So I'm going to lift this up, and it'll be a lot lighter than I had hoped. Again, I end up with that water splotching. Just dab it up with some paper towel. So that's pretty. It's just not as dark as I'd like it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and scribble some more ink onto that acetate. Now you don't need any fancy acetate either. This is just really from some packaging that I had left over. So it's another great way to, recycle some packaging that you may have on hand already. I tend not to throw a lot out, so it was nice to have on hand. Again, I'm going to get my spray bottle, and now this is more of a wet on wet technique because that watercolor piece is already wet from the first time that we laid that down or smushed the ink onto it. I ended up bringing in a pink color just to give it a little bit more contrast. I thought that these colors just were too similar and didn't create enough of a contrast that I liked between the colors. So again, just using my fingers to smush the ink about, rubbing it along, and then pulling up the acetate. Try to work out those bubbles. Now what ended up happening here is I have some hard water edges there. This piece is okay. It's not necessarily one of my favorites. I'll still use it, but I don't think I ended up creating a card with it this time. I wanted to try again even further to bring in a little bit more color, so I'm using a yellow. And I'm not sure it really made things any better in the end, but that's okay. It's a learning process for everyone, right? So yeah, so with this one, it was not my favorite, like I said, but I will still use it in a card. Let me go ahead and dry this up a little bit more because I am impatient. And then we can take a look at how it ended up. So yeah, it's okay. You can see those hard water lines, but that's all right. So there's two fun kind of pastel-y backgrounds, and we'll move on to our next background. For this next background, I am using my Grambascher, I think that's how you say it, watercolor palette set that I set up here. I've got the colors swatched out on the side, and they come in tubes, and I just squirt them into this palette, and then it's okay if they dry out. You can just reactivate them with some water, so I'll go ahead and do that with my little spray bottle. That's something very handy to have on your craft desk at all times, is just a little spray bottle. Mine is nothing fancy. I just picked it up from the good old dollar store. I'm all about saving the money. I know there's nice fancy misters out there, but I just don't think it's necessary for me to have, so yeah, each to his own. I have a round brush here. I'm going to link everything over on the Scrap and Stamp blog, so make sure you go ahead and head over there to see what I am using, as well as the great sales that they have going on over there. I'm starting off by just wetting this Canson watercolor piece with this flat brush and doing the wet on wet technique, trying to create some of those watercolor blob looks. I'm always fascinated how people can create these with brushes. Again, I am way too controlled for it. I need to relax. I'm like that Taylor Swift song, you need to calm down. I'm really wound up and too structured sometimes in what I do. So this was a good lesson for me. These watercolor blobs are really controlled, but I think they work in the end with how I created this card. So you'll have to let me know if you liked how this one turned out. Again, it's a little more controlled and structured, but you still kind of get that watercolor splashed look. So I'm just using blue, yellow, and green. Some of that green I mixed in a little bit of black just to darken it up. And you want this to be a strong enough pigment, but still wet enough. You don't want like a thick paint. Sometimes your watercolors, when you take up too much pigment, it can thicken up a lot and almost be like painting with an acrylic. So you want to make sure you have enough water in there as well. And here I decided to let loose a bit, and I'm going to add splatter to the project. That's another thing that's really hard for me to do, is lose control with where the splatters go. So this was fun as well. So just creating those three main focal points of the yellow, blue, and green splashes, and then adding the splatter to it. So again, I thought this was a really, really simple but a really fun background in the end. And of course I'm using my heat tool just to set it a little bit, and then I can put that aside to dry. Now the next one I'm going to do, I am doing more of blobs. Now sadly, something happened to this piece in the drying process, so it didn't make the final cut in being able to make a card. My daughter was crafting with me and there was a little incident with this piece, but that's okay. I learned something as I created it. So we're going to start off again with the wet on wet technique and just layering a nice layer of water on top of this cardstock piece. Again, you don't want it so wet that your piece is starting to curl, but you need the watercolor paper wet enough so that that pigment will spread when you lay it down. So starting out again with just some simple colors. This is, I can't remember what this color is. It's more of a burgundy. Let's see if I can find it here. I love how it just spreads out there. Reminds me of fireworks. It's just so beautiful when it spreads like that. That color in particular was the alizarin crimson. Love that color. It's one of my favorite reds. And then I'm using the blue. That blue was the cobalt blue, and I was really hoping it would blend together to create kind of a nicer purple. It didn't in the end, but that's okay. Again, I'm adding some more of that alizarin crimson just to see if the two colors will blend. It did a little bit create a bit of purple, and I try to work it. The yellow is the cadmium yellow. And I'll add some of that in there. Again, I was trying to keep to some primary colors to see what I could get to blend on the watercolor piece itself. And this looked great here. I loved how this dried up, and I think it would have created a nice background. Trying to just deepen up that blue to see if I can get the purples and then the green. I have a nice orange going on there. But this is really, really wet. And so I'm just moving a little bit of those colors around. And so I set that aside to dry, and unfortunately, while it was still wet, something I think got dropped on it and created some nasty little images. But that's okay. We saw how it was created, and that was fun. We're going to move on to Distress Oxide blending. You can see here I've got the Wild Honey Spiced Marmalade and Seedless Preserves. Again, all the items are linked over at the Scrap and Stamp blog, which I will link to in the description. Pulling out my purple tape this time. This is again a nice low tack tape, and I want to create some borders on this image, and this is a nice, this purple tape in particular is nice and thin. I had one previously that was thicker. And the only issue is on the edge there, how they cut the roll. It does have, I don't think they used a sharp enough blade when they made these rolls, so there's that edge is not straight. It's got a little bit of a wonky line to it. And then my tape ended up peeling funny because of how the roll was actually cut. Hope that makes sense. Nonetheless, I'm just starting off here by creating a border with this purple tape. Having that nice stark white border on a very colorful image just looks so super classy to me. I love how it looks. So after I'm done struggling with my tape here, get a nice long piece, line it up on the edge. I want to make sure that each border is even. And I'll just finish off this edge. And then we're just really going ahead and doing simple ink blending with just our regular ink blending foam sponges. And Distress Oxides blend so beautifully. I seem to have a little bit more of a struggle with the regular Distress inks. They don't seem to blend as nicely together with the foam brush. So usually when I'm using distress inks, I will reach for my Picket Fence blending brushes. I like the blending that I get better with that tool. I don't get such a harsh circle image like I do with these ones. So they just, yeah, it just seems like this blending tool works better for the oxides for me, and then the Picket Fence brushes work better for the Distress Oxide inks. I really love the color combination of these Distress Oxides. I actually got this color combination from Kay Werner. She's got some great samples of colors that she's put together, so definitely check her blogs out. Pinterest is a great place as well to get color combinations, so recommend you heading over there and check those out. Look at this purple. Oh, Seedless Preserves is one of my favorites. So when you're using Distress Oxides, it's important that you go back and forth to blend the edges of the colors just to get that nice seamless blend. My favorite part, as always, is pulling up the tape. Again, you do want to be careful. This is a low-tack tape. Sometimes, though, it still can pull up your cardstock. It just depends on the cardstock, the quality of your cardstock, as well as you know, just how hard you burnish down the adhesive. But look at this. Beautiful. So classy. I recommend also maybe putting the tape on the back of your hand just to release it from some of that adhesive. Going on to our next colors here, Cracked Pistachio, Broken China, and Faded Jeans. I am using a thicker tape here. This is just regular painter's tape. Again, you want to release some of the stick from the back so it doesn't pull up your cardstock or rip your cardstock. I still had a bit of ripping with this, no matter how much I did take the tack off. I didn't do a lot of it in the beginning here, but as we go along, I do continue to try and take some of that off. I'm using my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station, the grid on the back there, just to line up the tape to get a nice straight line. And this color combination, I wasn't sure if I'd really like it, but it turned out beautifully. And what I want to do here is just create a rectangle. So I've got my blending tools out, and then I realized I still want a bit of a border around the edge. So I'll bring back in that Thermoweb tape and create the white border edge on the right hand side here. Now also something to keep in mind, if you are reusing your tape from panel to panel, you'll actually want to wipe the top of the paint off because that Distress Oxide does sit on top of there, and when you go to blend, it will pull down any color that is already on there. So I tend to just re-stick it to my surface, spray it with a little bit of water, and then wipe it down with a microfiber cloth in between projects just so it doesn't pull down that color. Alright, so we're going to start off with this Cracked Pistachio. Quickly show you how this one is created. Again, I like to try to start off the cardstock just a bit, just so I don't get that harsh round foam impression. And just bringing it down about 1/3 of the way. Moving on to the Broken China. You can see I got a little bit of the circles there. Again, it's not so bad with the Distress Oxides. They do seem to blend together a little better. But if I was using the regular Distress inks, it would definitely pose a problem for me. I would still have that round image there, that kind of ghost image. Another thing you can do with this, I didn't do it this time though, is once you're done blending all your inks together, you can go ahead and spray a little bit of water on it and lift it with, say, a cloth, and that'll give you a nice water, almost like a watercolor background look to it as well, just with some of that water droplets being lifted, some of that pigment being lifted up. And again, this is super fun and quick backgrounds that you can create. You can do these on mass production, and that's what I ended up doing, is I created many cards at once. And so simple, but yet super beautiful. And then this is like Christmas morning as we release the tape. Now here I did have a little bit of ripping, but I'll use a die to die cut the edges out, and hopefully it'll remove that. And there you go, we've got a nice beautiful inked image. I should have pushed down the tape a little harder on the edges, just I had a little bleed out there on the left hand side, but not to worry. Gonna switch it up again here. Now I want to go on to the diagonal. I want to create a triangle here. Again, just laying out the thermal web tape and the painter's tape. And you can see I'm reusing pieces and that I have wiped these pieces off. All right, I'm going to be using the squeezed lemonade and then the picked raspberry, as well as peacock feathers. Again, this color combination actually worked super well together. I ended up getting an orange and a purple color when I blended these colors together. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors out of it. So it worked really well. Starting at the top with the squeezed lemonade, working that ink in. And then I'm going to speed this up a bit here just so you don't have to sit through all the ink blending because it's all the same. So working that squeezed lemonade into the top portion of this triangle. And at this point my hands are actually getting really, really tired and sore. I struggle with stiffness in my hands, and these foam ink blenders really do a doozy on them. That picked raspberry is just such a beautiful, beautiful pink color, and when you blend it with this squeezed lemonade, it creates that beautiful orange. Now there will be a little bit of transfer of that pink color to the yellow brush, but I just end up wiping it off onto a microfiber cloth. Then the peacock feathers and the pink raspberry blended together, you can see that beautiful purple color that it's creating. So this gorgeous rainbow color, like Christmas morning, we'll pull this off and look at this blending. It is gorgeous. Again, trying to be very careful with this painter's tape as it is very sticky. And look at that, just beautiful. Okay, I'm going to show you how I finished off my cards with these great sentiments from My Favorite Things. It's the Hello Beautiful, the Sassy Pants Friends. Did I use that one? No, but that's another good one. I used the All Smiles, the what do we have here? Kind Words, the Anything But Basic Friendship, and Anything But Basic Encouragement. These are all really, really great sentiments to use with these types of backgrounds. This is absolutely my favorite one out of the bunch. Is a quote by Marilyn Monroe. I was obsessed with Marilyn Monroe when I was younger, and it says, "Sometimes things fall apart so that better things can fall together." I think that's so true in life. So I think this makes a really, really great encouragement card. Again, you saw there I'm using my favorite ink, Versaclair Fine Black ink for the sentiments, and then this is how I finished it off. I used that wonky stitch die from My Favorite Things, some jewels from Studio Katya. This is that splash card that I tried to make. I think it turned out really well. Some of the ink blending. So head on over to the Scrap and Stamp blog to see all the materials used. I hope this has inspired you to create some simple cards from products that you already have. I thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day, everyone.